How many individuals in the Vice President's office or the White House have tested positive this week, and how many of them have symptoms?
You know, we don't give out that kind of information. Obviously, Mark Short and a couple of the key staff around the Vice President have come down with the coronavirus. It just goes to show you that that we continue to face this enemy that came from China, and yet what we also know is the one area where we are rounding the corner is really the death rate as it looks to that. Our ability to handle this has improved each and every day, each and every month. And, when there were estimates that as many as 10% of the population that got this would actually experience a fatal result, we're now down to 2.6. Every death is too many. But hopefully we're going to get this to the point where it's not as lethal as the flu.
So Mark, Pence advisor Marty Opes tested positive days ago, and that was not disclosed to the public at the time. According to the New York Times, quote, 2 people briefed on the matter said that the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, had sought to keep news of the outbreak from becoming public. Why would you do that? Is it because it's yet another sign of how much the White House has failed to contain the virus?
Yeah, obviously that's not a report. That's actually a tweet. And when we look at this, when we're really talking about...
No, that was in the New York Times story. That was in the New York Times story.
When we actually have people's health at risk, what we look at there, Jake, is sharing personal information is not something that we should do, not something that we do actually do, unless it's the Vice President or the President or someone that's very close to them where there's people in harm's way. Listen, anytime that there's someone in harm's way, we have an obligation to let people know to contact trace. We have done that. We did
Chris
that.
Christie says you didn't do that with him.
In this particular, well, in that vein, when you look at Chris Christie, it's within 48 hours of symptoms. And when we looked at the president, there was not a contact within 48 hours of the president where he would qualify under CDC guidelines. We actually have a CDC person in bed. Hold on, Jake. We've got a CDC person embedded here in the White House that helps us with contact tracing
I understand
each and every day.
So, Mark Short has been in close contact with Vice President Pence. I mean, they are always with each other. Short is now positive for the virus.
That's correct.
So CDC guidelines say that Vice President Pence should quarantine for 14 days. Now, I understand the White House is trying to get around that by saying the Vice President is an essential worker. But, Mark, how is going all over the country, how is that campaigning? How is that essential work? It's not like he's helping to contain the virus. In fact, the opposite. He's holding rallies that could be spreading the virus.
Well, actually, he's not just campaigning, he's working. We saw a Middle East peace agreement with Sudan in the Oval Office that the president engaged in. And for anybody to suggest that the president has been out campaigning and not getting things done, all you have to do is look at the facts.
He was at a campaign rally in Tallahassee. He was just in a campaign rally in Tallahassee.
I'm not saying he's not campaigning. I'm saying that is only part of what he's doing. And as we look at that, essential personnel, whether it's the Vice President of the United States or anyone else,
but he's not
has to continue
following
on.
CDC guidelines.
Well, no, Jake, CDC guidelines does say essential personnel.
Yes, it says wear a mask. If they wear a mask.
And I spoke to the Vice President last night at midnight. And I can tell you that what he's doing is wearing a mask, socially distancing, and when he goes up to speak, he will take the mask off, put it back on. But he's wearing a mask as it relates to this particular thing because the doctors have advised him to do that. And so, Jake, when we start to look at this, here's where we really need to make sure. On your website yesterday, Jake, your website is talking about, well, now we think the spread is coming from small social groups and family groups. First it was large groups. Now it's small groups.
It's coming from all sorts of places.
Well,
it's coming from all sorts of places because the pandemic's out of control.
So here's what we have to do. We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and other mitigation
Why aren't we going to get control of the pandemic?
Because it is a contagious virus, just like the flu.
Yeah, but why not make efforts to contain it?
Well, we are making efforts to contain it.
By running all over the country, not wearing a mask?
Jake,
that's what the Vice President's doing.
We can get into the back and forth. Let me just say this. Is what we need to do is make sure that we have the proper mitigation factors, whether it's therapies or vaccines or treatments, to make sure that people don't die from this. But to suggest that we're going to actually quarantine all of America, lock down our economy.
No one's saying that.
Well, they are. Joe Biden's saying that. He says lock everybody down. We're going to have a dark winter. We're going to have a dark winter.
That's what health officials say. That's what health officials say, that it's going to get worse.
No,
we had
that's
the
Joe
two
Biden's
worst days.
Jake,
let's be honest. Infections, Friday and Saturday.
Let's be honest here. The health officials did not say dark winter. Those were Joe Biden's words.
He was quoting a health official. I think he was quoting William Haseltine.
When we look at the number of cases increasing, what we have to do is make sure that we fight it with therapeutics and vaccines, take proper mitigation factors in terms of social distancing and masks when we can. And when we look at this, we're going to defeat it, Jake, because we're Americans. We do that, and this president is leading while Joe Biden is sitting there suggesting that we're going to mandate masks.
The president is holding rallies all over the country.
That's correct.
No
In fact,
masks,
we're leaving.
No masks required. No distancing. There have already been, according to health officials, contact tracing. There have already been cases of individuals in Minnesota and in Washington, D.C., and in Oklahoma that got the virus at these Trump rallies that Dr. Fauci himself called a super spreader event, the one at the White House.
There's also been contact tracing, Jake.
That is not leading.
There's also been contact tracing from reporters, some with your own group, where they actually have worn masks religiously. And so what I'm here to tell you is we need to find the vaccines and the therapeutics to actually give Americans the relief that this is not a death sentence, because it's not. And yet at the same time, to suggest that any of that is not accurate is just not based on the facts.
Here's the bottom line. We know, according to health officials, that masks are the best thing people can do in terms of trying to prevent the virus from spreading, period. That's what they say. Until the vaccine and Operation Warp Speed, and until that all works out, the best thing to do are masks. That's from Dr. Redfield, it's from Dr. Fauci, it's from Dr. Birx, it's from everybody. Okay? Vice President Pence is the head of the coronavirus task force. He has been exposed to somebody who tested positive. The CDC guidelines say he should quarantine. Now, you're trying to say he's running all over the country, meeting voters, campaigning is an essential worker business. I don't think it is, but okay, if you do that, why is he not wearing a mask? I haven't seen any pictures of him on the tarmac or anywhere wearing a mask. And should the American people follow the CDC guidelines, or should they not? Because the vice president is not.
Well, I can tell you he is wearing a mask. He will be wearing a mask today as we have this. Obviously, when you have an exposure, you have to take additional mitigation factors to do that. But the other part of that, Jake, is this, is even those experts that you talked about, when we talk about masks, I said, well, if mask is the answer and mandating mask is the answer, can we put all our students back in schools? If we just mandate masks and make sure the teachers wear masks,
should Americans follow CDC guidelines?
Will they be safe? And the answer was no.
Should Americans follow CDC guidelines?
Certainly Americans should follow CDC guidelines. And when we look at that,
does that include the president?
That includes the president and it includes everyone, but there are special.
Well, then why don't your supporters wear masks at rallies?
Well, you're asking about the supporters versus the president.
Well, why don't you require? Supporters to wear masks at rallies?
We don't mandate masks because here's the other thing: is we offer them out. We live in a free society, Jake. And when you look at that, you know, under a Joe Biden's America, he would lock everything down. He would make sure. No, well, how do you know that? Have you asked him that question? Ask him that question, Jake.
Because I've seen a million interviews. I've seen a million interviews with it. We're not talking about hypothetical.
No, you are talking about hypothetical.
I've interviewed Biden more than I've interviewed Trump. Okay, I'll put it that way.
I get that. Well, because from a standpoint,
we don't have to get into that.
We can get into that. In terms of interviews, I think most journalists would agree Joe Biden has largely been unavailable. He's hoping to run out the clock so that the American people will not know.
The American people should abide by CDC guidelines, but you are not even asking your supporters to wear masks, even though
we pass them out, Jake. I mean,
do you know how many people in Minnesota have gotten the virus because of Trump rallies?
Have you been to a rally? You come on with us to a rally, and we'll show you. We give out masks. We have a number of people.
They don't wear them.
Well, it's a free society. You're not wearing one right now, Jake.
There's literally nobody in this room. There is literally not
Yeah,
one
and
person
so-
in the studio.
So you're saying that you always wear a mask wherever you go. Come on, Jake. The American people know that's not true. I know it's not true.
I wear a mask except when I'm in here, in my office, and home. That is true. 100%.
But
I
under
wear a
what-
mask when I walk in the hallway at CNN.